This is another video for Algebra Honors. We are continuing with our final exam study guide. I believe we have 12 questions to go, so let's start with number 50. We are, for 49 and 50, our instructions were please solve these equations using any method, and remember, you're finding the value for x that makes the y value or the output 0. So we always want to set everything equal to 0, and then we're going to solve. Okay, you can use Desmos to check your work, and you just want to make sure that you can show some work in addition to using Desmos. I'm going to set this whole equation equal to 0. 0 equals x squared plus 9x plus 7. So when I'm solving this, if I want to solve by factoring, I need two numbers that multiply to give me 7, but they're going to add to give me 9. And that doesn't really, there's nothing, right? There's nothing that's going to multiply together to give me 7 that's going to add to give me 9. So that means to me that I'm going to have to use the quadratic formula. Okay, so I'm going to plug in my A. A is 1, B, do whatever. B is 9, and C is 7. So remember, quadratic formula, we know that x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay, and now I'm just going to work out that math, and I might have Desmos help me. So negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81 minus 28, and it's all over 2. And so that's going to equal negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 53, all over 2. And so I am going to say that's my final answer. Most of the time we allow you to leave your answer in radical form. You don't have to actually work out the decimals. So that is something on Desmos. Desmos is going to give you decimals. And so if you are required to leave your answer in radical form, what you can do is at least leave this form as your answer, but you can double check this math and make sure it's the same answer that Desmos gave you as your x-intercepts. Okay, 51, which equation best represents the following graph? Well, I'm looking at my zeros. I have a 0 at negative 2, and I have a 0 at x equals 3. That means if I plug in 3, I'm going to have a 0, right? Or if I plug in negative 2, I'm going to have a 0. So remember, when we have our x values, we know that we can write the factors with the opposite sign. So x minus 2 times, it's going to be x plus 2. Whatever I add to negative 2 has to equal 0. I'm going to change the sign here, so it's going to be x minus 3. So you take whatever your 0 is and you change the sign. I didn't say that well at all. Take whatever your x value is, change the sign, and that's going to go into your binomial. Okay, so I know that my two binomials are going to be x plus 2 and x minus 3. So here's a quick reminder. When I do that, of course, that would equal 0 to get my zeros. I'm just checking to make sure I did this right. This means that x has to equal negative 2 and positive 3, right? In order for either one of those to be negative, I have to have negative 2 or 3, and so those are my answers, and I'm double checking that is in fact what I see on that graph. So I want x plus 2 and x minus 3, x plus 2, not that guy, x plus 2 and x minus 3, it's going to be this one. This doesn't make any sense because here's the other way you can look at this. This would mean that x equals 6 and negative 1, right? We know that's not true. This means that x equals negative 2 and 3. So this is another way to look at it. Yeah, x would have to equal 2 and negative 3 for that to be true. Okay, so we know it has to be this b information. Okay, so 52. You throw a softball into the air. The height in feet of the ball can be modeled by this quadratic equation where t is time and h is height. So, when you begin to throw the ball, your arm is at a height of 6 feet. That's this number right here. You're starting at 6. Okay, we're going to use Desmos to verify our answers, but we want to know how long will it take for the ball to reach the ground. Well, what is the height when it reaches the ground? 0. So we are just solving and finding the zeros, right? So I say the whole thing equals 0. It's probably better to plug this into Desmos using x instead of t. I think Desmos doesn't love using t. Okay, so granddaddy of all granddaddies, and I'm going to go ahead and solve this any which way I want to. I'm going to see if I can factor it. So the first thing I'm going to do is take out 2, right? So I have negative 8t squared plus 10t plus 3. This all equals 0. If I divide each side by 2, I'm going to have 0 divided by 2, so I still have 0, right? 2 divided by 2 is 1, so that really goes away. Now I'm going to see if I can factor that out. Negative 24, two things that multiply to give me negative 24, but add together to give me 10. I'm trying to think whether I know that right off the bat. And I'm going to rethink this because I don't really want to deal with a negative. So I'm actually going to, let's pretend I didn't do that. I'm going to pull out negative 2. That's just going to make life easier. 0 equals negative 2 times, now I have 8t squared minus 10t minus 3. Now when I divide each side by negative 2, 0 divided by negative 2 is still 0. And so now I'm just going to be factoring that. Okay, so if I use my X puzzle, I want two numbers that multiply to give me negative 24, and they have to add to give me negative 10. So that should be negative 12 and 2. Negative 12 times 2 is negative 24. Negative 12 plus 2 is negative 10. So I'm going to solve by grouping. So negative 16t squared minus 12t plus 2t plus 6. I'm sorry, not plus 6, minus 3. Hold on, magic. We're going to say minus 3, right? I am factoring that. So I'm completely wrong. 8t squared minus 12t, there you go, plus 2t minus 3. Forgive me. Use Desmos. Okay, now I'm going to pull out my factors that I can pull out. So this is going to be 4t here. That leaves me with 2t minus 3. And 2t minus 3, I can only pull out a 1, so I have 1 times 2t minus 3. And so that means that I'm going to have 4t plus 1 times 2t minus 3. Okay, how long will it take the ball to reach the ground? It's going to equal 0. That means 4t plus 1 equals 0. 4t equals negative 1, which means t equals negative 1/4. Or 2t equals 3, which means that t equals 3/2. Well, we don't have negative time in our thoughts, and so we're going to say when time is at 3/2 of a second, that's when our ball will hit the ground. Okay, and if you plug the original information into Desmos, you're going to see that you have two different zeros. One is going to be at negative 1/4 and the other is going to be at 3/2. Okay. All right, so what's the maximum height? Well, that means we're looking for the vertex, right? We know that visually this is going to be a ball that goes up and then back down, and also we know it's an upside down or an opening down parabola because we have a negative in our A position, and so we want the vertex. The vertex x value is negative b over 2a. So let's come back up here, a, b, c. Always go to the original equation for things like this. My b value is 20, so I have negative of 20 over 2 times my a value, which is negative 16. That's negative 20 over negative 32, which is divisible by negative 4, so I have 5/8. Okay, I think the x value of my vertex then is at 5/8. Remember, we need x and y, so I need an ordered pair. So my y value, I'm just going to plug in 5/8 up here, 5/8 as my time, which is my x value, right? And I'm going to do that on a calculator. I'm going to do that in Desmos. And when I do that, I end up with 12.25. 12 and 1/4, 49 fourths, however you care to write it. Okay, 12.25 or 49 fourths. All right, if you wanted to do that manually, you're going to put in 5/8 everywhere there's a t. So negative 16 times 5/8 squared plus 20 times 5/8 plus 6, because you just go back to your original equation. And that equals 12 and 1/4. All right, what is the height of the ball when t is 1 second? Right, because time is 1 second. Well, that means height at 1 second is negative 16 times 1 squared plus 20 times 1 plus 6. So negative 16 plus 20 plus 6 is 4 plus 6. I'm missing a negative. Negative 16 plus 20 plus 6. No, I'm not, just kidding. 4 plus 6 is really 10. Okay, so my height when time is 1, my height is 10 feet. Okay? Can you see? No, you can't even see what I'm writing. I'll try that again. Sorry. What is the height of the ball at 1 second? Sorry. I don't know if you could see what I was writing a moment ago. So I want to know what is the height at 1 second. So I'm going back to the original equation, negative 16t squared plus 20t plus 6. And I'm just plugging in t equals 1. So negative 16 times 1 squared plus 20 times 1 plus 6. Okay, so this is negative 16 times 1 plus 20 times 1 plus 6. So that's 4 plus 6. And that is 10. So the height when we are at 1 second is 10 feet. Okay. All right. Let's graph the equation y equals x squared minus 2 on a coordinate plane. So it's a quadratic, right? I have a positive coefficient before the x squared, so I know we're going to open up. And I have negative 2 as my constant, so I know I'm going to be crossing the x-axis at negative 2. All right, so I need to figure some things out. What is the axis of symmetry? X equals negative b over 2a. And so that means that I have the negative of, well, there's no b value, so it's just a 0, over 2a, and a is 1, so that's really just 0, yeah? So at 0 is my axis of symmetry. That means everything that I have a point for on the left side of the y-axis, I will also have a matching point on the right side of the y-axis. Okay, so x equals 0 is my axis of symmetry. I drew it here with purple. That's my axis of symmetry. Okay, and so what are the coordinates of the vertex? Well, I know the x part is 0, so let's go and plug this in. 0 minus 2, negative 2. Identify the zeros. Okay, so I need to know 0 equals x squared minus 2. So I'm going to add 2 to each side. 2 equals x squared, and then I'm going to take the square root of each side. So I know x equals positive or negative square root of 2. If I'm having to graph that, I'm going to go ahead and say that's positive or negative 1.41. Because to graph it, I can't really graph it unless I know about what we're talking about with a decimal. Okay, so at 1.41, I have a 0, and at negative 1.41, I have a 0. Okay, if I wanted to, I could also do an XY table, but I know we're going to be coming along like that. Okay, all right, what is the range? Well, range is the y values, so I want interval notation. Okay, so I'm going to look up and down. I do have a barrier. The smallest y I can possibly have, the smallest y is negative 2. And that is not an open circle. That means I can actually be at negative 2. But then I can go up forever. So I'm going to go to infinity. And so I use a parenthesis to show infinity. Okay, that's interval notation. Set builder notation, I would say that I have all y's such that y is greater than or equal to negative 2. Okay. Solve this equation. Oh, it's an absolute value. So this is from Unit 2. So remember, whatever's inside here, if it's positive 10, the absolute value of positive 10 is 10. If it's negative 10 inside there, the absolute value of negative 10 is also positive 10. So I know that I can have x plus 7 equal positive 10, but also if x plus 7 equals negative 10, and I take the absolute value, it's going to work for me. Okay, so subtract 7 from each side. I know x equals 3 here. Subtract 7 from each side, x equals negative 17. So my answer would be negative 17, 3. I'm using curly brackets to show that it's the set of numbers that includes negative 17 and 3. Okay? Solve this equation. Well, I'm going to isolate my absolute value bar first, okay, the absolute value expression. So we're going to divide each side by 3. I'm left with x plus 1 in absolute value bars equals 3. So x plus 1 actually equals 3, or it equals negative 3. And then I would take the absolute value of it. So x equals 2, and also x equals negative 4. Okay, absolute value again. This time I have an inequality statement. Okay, and so remember when we have less than, we're going to do that problem later.